세상다 관연도 대바사들은 나로래지 자외 대바
We
가시
talk about the
니르라고요.
Higo
아니
Shravaka, we think it's
디지털
sit there.
대화체는 자외 대바사지
But
되는
there we
니네
talk about
다
the
대바
two original schools, and we
다들
talk about then the
접게 받는
subsidiary
거
schools. So
수용되고
the 18 schools. So there are these many different schools, right?
드네인도다 드네 대바 망고 디조다 치수 매번
So many of these
오나다
schools
고로
disappeared later,
제베로
but in
유여로
the past, the history is that there were quite a few different schools.
안전동 미망부지 자외 대바디조
Now, many of us think that the original schools include the Theravada school, but we don't think of that as being our Mahayana schools. We wonder how they're connected to the Mahayana. This is how people think, right? However, when we look at the actual situation, whether we're talking about the Mahayana Vinaya, the Mahayana Abhidharma, it is basically all the same as the foundation vehicle Abhidharma and Vinaya. And so if it's something that we're going to look at its source, we have to look at the foundation vehicle. Likewise, many of the ancient or the old Indian masters, such as Nagarjuna, Asanga, and so forth, and also there's the Kempo Chandarakshita, as well as Lord Atisha, and they all went forth in various different schools. And they lived under the rules of any particular school in a particular monastery as they did their studies.
이내야당 안 상으로지 가수로다 대바 지단이 돼 대바래 엔티나네지
Generally, we think about the foundation vehicle schools and we think about the 18 schools. We don't really understand the situation. And so this is a fault that we do have. Please wait a moment.
当然是面对个特别高了呀，现在他说，过多时代买不起，是吧？
We don't have much an understanding of the schools of the foundation vehicle. We haven't studied them much. So what is the reason for this? Just because in general within Tibetan Buddhism, when we study, we don't really study the teachings or the histories of the early Buddhism or the 18 schools. There's no tradition of doing this. We have no habit of doing this. Likewise, we only study the Mulasavastivada Vinaya. We do not look at the Vinaya of other schools and the Abhidharma of their schools either. There's basically no translations of them into Tibetan. And because of that weakness, we naturally have little understanding of the schools, and we have not studied them much. So we've Taranata's History of Buddhism in India and other texts, and these do have quite a bit to say about the 18 schools. Likewise, within our Karma Kamsang, the 8th Karmapa Dorje's collected works has a question and answers with the pension Dorkyawa. And we can see that these had some interest in the 18 schools. But if we look at the general atmosphere. When we think about we have not had a tradition of studying the 18 schools in the past. It's not so that we don't have them now. We didn't have them in the past. And since we haven't studied any of the texts of the previous of the 18 schools, even if we want to talk about them at length, there's no way that we can. So I think this is how it happened. So generally, when we're talking about the 18, the five great texts, we have this text of studying the five great texts, right? And among them, the Vinaya and the Abhidharma are considered for higher classes, and in terms of their content are actually a little bit complicated. They're considered to be this way. But if we don't understand those two well, then it's difficult to understand the two original schools or the subsidiary schools. It's difficult to understand the historical development of the Foundation Vehicle schools and their schools. If we can understand that, then I think it'll be very beneficial for us understanding those two texts as well. It's the actual, in terms of studying, it'll be something that's actually practically very beneficial for us in our studies, and that is very fruitful for us. It's a question of think that if you know it, it's fine. It's not food if you don't. Another important point is that generally, we decided to divide the Buddhist teachings into the three vehicles. And when we divide it into the three vehicles, there are people who say that the Mahayana is not the words of the Buddha. But when you talk about the greater, the Mahayana, it's not something that just a few great individuals made up. It's not like the Mahasanghika school and the other schools. If we look for them, if we want to see them as the sources for the Mahayana, we can see that. And because of this, so in this way, if we need to also look, should not look only in the Mahayana schools, but we can also look to their vehicles to prove that the Buddha's words are the words of the Mahayana is the words of the Buddha. And in order to prove this, we also have a good understanding of the foundation vehicle texts, and we can see the connections between those and the Mahayana. And if we can explain this, then it'll be easier to prove that the Mahayana is the words of the Buddha and are the true, real words. And what's most difficult in the Mahayana is the secret mantra Vajrayana. And then from the beginning to the end, there are many people who have said that secret mantra Vajrayana is not the Buddha's words. And as I've said before, the secret mantra Vajrayana was found in the Buddha's teachings from the very beginning. For example, there's the teachings of the Mahamayuri mantra and so forth. And so if you cannot actually say that it's all completely an invention and it's something that was made up because of these proofs. So if we look at the texts, scriptures, the foundation vehicle, and their history, then I think it's very beneficial for us in many ways. And there's a lot that we can learn from that. And so this is something important for us to understand. So next, I would like to continue where we left off the other day. So the other day we spoke about the 10 points. So we have to give a summary of the 10 points, but before that we need to think about how much influence Ananda had on the Buddhist Sangha after the Parinirvana. Then after that, I'll do the summary of the 10 points. Now, after the Parinirvana, or perhaps 100 or 200 years, so in this period of 100 or 200 years, there was the Second Council. And this Second Council was a very significant event in Buddhist history. Likewise, when we see that when there is the original split of the Buddhist community into two, or the first sectarian split in the Buddhist Sangha, so this has a very close connection to the council. And also, when we research early Buddhism, we see that this council had, in many different ways, a profound influence on the spread of Buddhism and a very deep influence on its future. And so it has a lot of important points there. So generally, it's possible that even before this council, there had been differences of opinion or disagreements of the view, or even some opposition among the Buddhist Sangha. This is definitely possible. It's possible, but before the Second Council, the Buddhist Sangha continued to be a single community. It's unified. It still had like a unified, it was a single school. It was like a single Sangha. However, when there were the 10 points we discussed earlier, there were some said they were permissible and some said they were impermissible. Anyways, once the controversy over the 10 points came out, the differences of opinion within the Sangha became more pronounced. And eventually, at the end, it divided into two main factions. And this is what we call the original split into two schools. It's like the school divided into two schools. There were like two factions. And this is what we call the original split into two schools. So before there is the split into two schools, there's the problem of the 10 points. And in order to settle the dispute over the 10 points, then 8 elders chosen by the Sangha as a general to resolve the dispute, they gathered and they had the Second Council. So now, in addition to the 700 arhats, there are also 10,000 bhikshus. So that there are many tens of thousands of Sangha members. But of all there are 700 arhats, but within, or elders, but within there are if they all had to give them all time to speak, it's been very complicated. So the two sides chose 4 elders each, 4 from the east, 4 from the west, and they were like representatives. And it is primarily these 8 elders who conducted the discussions. Now, according to some scholars, the 8 elders were not only the people who resolved the controversy over the 10 points. From the time of the Second Council until the the original split into schools, there were very influential figures. The reason is that these 8 elders were among the but among the people, they're the people who have the greatest qualities. They're the most senior. Uh, and so when we look at the Pali texts, the eight arhats, some were, most of them had lived to lived to the age of 120. Some lived to the age of 160. And in any case, the eight alders were all selected from within these 700, and there were these eight were chosen. They're like the most well-known, the most influential, the most significant among the Buddhist Sangha. So these eight elders were, from one perspective, were the people who laid the foundation for Buddhism, because at that time, during the Second Council was extremely important. At that time, the sutras and the Vinaya and other scriptures were compiled. Of course, they were compiled at the time of the First Council, but they were considered to be completed and finalized at the time of the Second Council. And so, for that reason, from the time of the Second Council, the eight elders were extremely important. They're the ones who laid the foundations of Buddhism. And they were significant figures with a deep connection to the development of early Buddhism. Now, one important thing that we need to pay some attention to is that within the scriptures of the different schools, there are slightly different explanations of the names of the eight elders. There are some different lists, but in general, most of them are the same. Now, within the scriptures of each of the different schools, not only do they give the elders names, but they also mention that most of them were students of Ananda's. They explained this very clearly. So next, I would like to show a table showing who of these elders had a master-disciple connection with Ananda according to the scriptures of the various schools. So I'll show you a table of that. I think if you see this, you will immediately understand. This is the table. So the eight are there's Sarvagami, there's Shala, Kuja, Subhuta, Vasagamika, Rivata, Sambhuta, Yashakandaka, and Sumana. These are the eight elders. They're listed along the columns. And so those who are students of Ananda have the yellow sun sign. Those who are students of Aniruddha have the blue sign. So if we look at the Theravada Khandaka, Sarvagamin was a student of Ananda's. In the Dharmakutta it says that Sarvagamin, Vasabhagamika, Vidavata, and Sambhuta, these four were all students of Ananda's. According to the Mahishashaka 5-part Vinaya, Sarvagamin is said to be an Ananda. So Sarvagamin is said to be a student of Ananda in all the different schools. The ones that are different, these two are a little bit. Some say that he is the. So the interest ones. So the Sarvastivadita and Agamas, Vasagamika and Sumana, the Dipavamsa and Mahavamsa say that Vasagamika and Sumana are students of Aniruddha. Now, in our Tibetan history, such as the Dharma history by Bhutan, says that not only the 800, not only the 8 elders, but also most of the 700 arhats were also students of Ananda's. In any case, at the time of the second council, most of the 8 elders were students of Ananda. So as I said, the 8 elders at that time were also not only leaders of the Buddhist Sangha, they also founded the laid the basis for Buddhist the foundation for Buddhism during the Second Council, and so they gave great benefit. And so we can understand from this that at 100 or 200 years after the parinirvana of the Buddha, there was the Second Council, which they laid the entire foundation for the entire Buddhist teachings. The elders or the individuals who were most influential in forming this council were among them Ananda, because it was Ananda and his disciples. During the second, during the Second Council, it was the main figures were students of Ananda. So this shows that his influence. So it's after that Ananda passed away. Excuse me, after the Buddha passed away, Ananda had some difficulties when Mahakashyapa sent him away. But Mahakashyapa himself was also very old, and he's passed away. And the one who really primarily was one who took care of the teachings was Ananda. So Ananda was this. And most of the elders were students of Ananda. And so it seemed that basically all were students of Ananda. Now, following this, there's this, I'll give a summary of the 10 points. Now, as I've said before earlier, so the way the 10 points occurred is that between 100 or 200 years after the Buddhist Parinirvana, there are these 10 points that occurred within the Bhiji victors of Vaishali. They said that these 10 points were permissible. The Western bhikshus, and primarily Yasha, said that they were impermissible. And so between these two, there was a controversy. I explained the background the other day. At that time, India, the Buddhism had spread not only in central Tibet, but it continued to spread to the western and spread widely in the western regions of India. And so these two different regions had their own different particulars. They had their own habits and their own customs, their own characters. And so because of this, then in terms of the Vinaya, there also naturally became different opinions and different views. And so that's the background situation. Now, the incident, as I described before, when the elder Yasha came from the western India, came to the east, and came to Vaishala, he saw that the people in that region were begging for gold and silver, and he said that this is not in violation, not permissible, it's violation of the rules of Sambai. And it was the bhikshus from Vaishala said that it was permissible, and so this is how the debate began. Now, the content of the 10 points is what I described the other day. The main one is accepting gold and silver. And so also the question of whether you could eat after noon, whether it was permissible to eat food after noon. So basically, they were about the need to relax the views and to loosen them. They had this up, so there are 10 points. Then there are also the sequence of events at the council And so when this great controversy erupted, then in order to pacify, to settle it, at that time, the elders from many different areas of India were invited, and many of the Sangha. And so there are 700 elders, and there are 20,000 Sangha members. And in the end, they all chose 8 representatives to engage in the discussion of whether the 10 points were permissible or not. The fine thing is the results of this is the end is that it is decided that the 10 points were not in accord with the Vinaya, that they were impermissible, that they are not in accord with the teachings of the Buddha. Now, at that time, the effect of this, the influence, is that because of this council, then it can be considered as like an early sign of the split between the Sangha into 2 main schools. The reason why is because they had disagreement. That created a controversy, and they'd have it settled the controversy, but the pictures from Eastern India were not all that happy with it. And because of that, and they're kind of dissatisfied, and eventually then the problem grew deeper and deeper, and so it split into 2 schools. Now we also do need to understand the influence of Ananda. Now, at the time of the Second Council, Ananda had a great influence, and the reason why is that among the 8 elders, who were the representatives, most of them were students of Ananda's. Not only the eight elders, but also the 700 arhats, most of them were also students of Ananda's. And so this shows the great influence of Ananda on the Sangha. And we saw that the leaders of the Sangha at that time were also students of Ananda. This is also very clear. So that is the summary of the 8 points. Now to continue. Now, because of the controversy over the 10 points, there were 2 events that occurred. The first of these was the Second Council, and the second, the other one, was the original split into 2 schools. The 10 points had a very influence. I'm saying this with taking the Theravada schools' Pali scriptures and their description of this. Now, the other schools have their other ways of explaining it. The schools have different ways of explaining it. If we take the Theravada scriptures as a basis, then because of the 10 points, they held the second point, and then that led to the original split into 2 schools. Now, during the Second Council, there was after Buddha's parinirvana, there's a first council where the bhikkhus all gathered together, and they reminded themselves of all the teachings of the Buddha, and they held that. And so then they recompiled them and refreshed their memory of this and recompiled it. So it was called the compilation or council. And as far as the original split into 2 schools, from the time of the Buddha's parinirvana, early Buddhism was unified. Gradually, from that time, there became 2 differences of views, and in the end, they initially split into different schools. And this is what we call the original split into 2 schools. It's not before that, there were not 2 factions, but because of different circumstances, they turned into two factions, and that is what we call the original split into 2 schools. To explain the timeline, these 2 events fundamentally occurred during the same era. However, the Second Council was slightly earlier, and the reason why is because the original took a fair amount of time. It took a fair amount of time, and it didn't happen in a single day. First, there were the 10 points, and then there was the Second Council, and still there's after the Second Council, many bhikshus were dissatisfied with the decisions of the elders, and gradually, after a certain amount of time, they turned into like two different factions. So it took a fair amount of time for it to split into two factions. So that for that reason, we need to first talk about the Second Council, and second talk about the original split into schools. So we need to now talk about the Second Council. Now, as I've explained a fair amount about it already. Now, the Second Council, for this, we have there are two. There's the assertions of the Theravada school, the assertions of the Mahasangika school, and the summary of the Second Council. Now, according to the Second Council, so first of all, I'll speak about how the Second Council is described in the scriptures of the Theravada school. Now, first, when it's decided that the 10 points were impermissible and that they were not in accord with the Vinaya discipline, after that was decided, the 700 arhats and the 20,000 bhikshus were all present, and so they took that opportunity to hold the Second Council to compile the Buddha's words. They held the Second Council. Now, at that time, the place where the Second Council was held was in the city of Vaishali. So sometimes, because it was held in Vaishali, it's called the Vaishali Council. And sometimes because of the participants, it's called the number of participants called the Council of the 700. Now, we say that there are the 20,000 Sangha members, but it's primarily the arhats, or the 700 elders. Some say 700 elders, some say 700 arhats. There were the 700 elders, 700 elderly elders, and for that reason it was called the Council of the 700. Now, the main purpose of the Second Council was to correct the Vinaya Pitaka. This is because when they're talking about the 10 points are permissible or not permissible, they had to speak about whether they had to look through within the Vinaya and see what was said in all this. There's a lot of question and answer about this. So they had a lot of discussion and answer. So the main purpose of the Second Council was corrected to the Vinaya Pitaka, and this is generally accepted. But actually, during the Second Council, not only did they recompile the Vinaya Pitaka, they recompiled all three Pitakas. And the way we can know this is as it is said in the Samatapasataka, a commentary on the Vinaya from the Theravada. This is the most well-known commentary on the Vinaya in the Theravada school. Here it says, the Buddhist Sarvagami replied, Venerable, now we should recite the Dharma and the Vinaya. We must select those who know the three Pitakas. They chose bhikkhus who know the three Gamsas. And then after they chose the Gamsas who know the three, because they gathered in the Valuka Grove in Vaishali, and no different from how Kashyapa convened the compilation of the Pitakas of the Dharma. So they gathered here in Vaishali, and they compiled the three baskets the same as it had been done by Kashyapa. cleansed the Buddha's teachings of impurities, inquiring on the basis of the Pitaka, inquiring about the sutras, inquiring on the basis of the branches, inquiring on the basis of the sections of Dharma. They definitively settled the entire baskets of Dharma and Vinaya. So this is how it is described in the Vinaya commentary, the Samantapasadika. So if we look at this, when we talk about the Dharma and the Vinaya, so when we say Dharma, we mean the basket of scriptures and the Vinaya. It's very clear that it compiles these two. Now, during the first council, earlier during the first council, they compiled the Dharma. They compiled the sutras, and whilst when they compiled it through questions about the location where the Buddha had taught, the time, the individual, and for whom it was taught, and so forth. They were compiled by a question and answer. So during the second council, when they're compiling the sutras, they asked more questions than the previous before. And they got the question and answer in a more complete and more full manner, in a different manner than had before. They used many different methods to have even better discussion. And so they put them in an order so that those that were out of order that were mixed up were corrected. And they also kind of further a little bit of the Abhidharma had been compiled during the first council. But during the second council, the small amount of the Abhidharma that had been compiled during the first council was again prepared in a more complete fashion. And so it's that they explained it. So many researchers hypothesize that these were all council. So during the second council, the three baskets of the sutras, Vinaya, and Abhidharma were all compiled completely. So it said that they were recited in full. The sutras and Vinaya and the Abhidharma were all recited. And so there is a complete recitation. According to the Sri Lankan Mahavamsa history, the second council lasted for 8 months. Now, the question of what is the date of the second council, there are many different positions on this. There are many different positions on this. For example, in the Sarvastivada Vinaya, the Mula Sarvastivada minor topics, the seventh fascicle of Xuanzang's Great Records of Travels to the Western Religions, all assert that it was held 110 years after the Parinirvana. But the Vinaya commentary Samantapasadika, the Dipavamsa and Mahavamsa, which are primarily Theravada scripts, explained that it was held 100 years after the Parinirvana. Now, the Indian scholar S.R. Goyal, he was a researcher, a scholar. He explains on the basis of the Samantapasadika, the Dipavamsa and the Mahavamsa, that the second council occurred during the reign of King Kalashoka. He said that it goes during the reign of him, and so says that this is the result of his research. According to Mahavamsa, though, the second council, the sponsor who provided everything was King Kalashoka, it seems. However, but during the reign of King Kalashoka, or to say that it was during the reign of Kalashoka that the second council was held, is not something that is agreed upon in all the different sources. Some say that it was, but some explain that he was not the king at the time. So many modern scholars say that it's the time during the reign of Kala Ashoka that it was, they say this is just a hypothesis, but it is not certain. Now, another explanation is that after the Second Council, the Vijayaputta pictures, the pictures from Vijayat and Vaishali were displeased, and they also held their own council. Now, there are many pictures who gathered for that. Most of the pictures gathered for that one. And so that was called the Council of the Majority, or the Mahasangaka. So this is a separate school from the 700. The Council of the Elders was that's called the Council of the 700, and that's the Second Council. That's the official Second Council. In terms of Buddhist history, we say that the description that the compilation of the three Pitakas was the Second Council, but there's the explanation that most of the bhikshus gathered for the other council, they were the majority, so it's called the Council of the Majority. Now, the source for this is this is from the scriptures, the Theravada school. It says, the wicked Vijayabhangsu who had been expelled by the elders gathered 10,000 bhikshus and held a compilation of the teachings. This is called the Council of the Mahasangika. The bhikshus who participated in the Council of the Mahasangha acted in violation of the Buddha's teachings and destroyed the basic first compilation of the scriptures, creating a separate new compilation. They took some profound sutras and parts of the Vinaya and compiled them as separate, incorrect sutras into Vinayas. So the Vijayaputras had their own council, and there were 10,000 bhikshus there. This is called the Mahasangaka Council. And they took their own parts of the sutras and the method. If you look at them at first, it looks like they look like they're Dharma in the Vinaya, but they're not actual. They made their own separate, and they both come their own separate sutras and Dharma and Vinaya. So when we look at this, the original split between the Stavira and the Mahasangaka began at this point. Now, another way that explained is that at the times the king of Vaishali supported the majority bhikshus. And he didn't let the Western bhikshus remain, and he expelled them. So for this reason, it seems that eventually there became a geographical difference between the Staviravada and the Mahasangaka. The ones in the west were the Staviravada, which is the predecessor of the Theravada, and then the eastern ones were primarily in the Mahasangaka. And so gradually, geographically, there was the Sarvastavada and the Staviravada and the Mahasangaka. So that's another explanation. The biggest difference is that the Westerners, the bhikshus from the West, respected all of the precepts, major or minor, without distinguishing between them, and they respected them all. And in terms of everything from the way they ate and the drank and so forth, they were more detailed and more strict about it. The Easterners respected the fundamental presence very highly, but they relaxed the minor precepts. They didn't consider them to be so important. So for that reason, the main impetus for the split occurred because of the Vinaya discipline. It's because of different opinions and different views about the Vinaya rules. So this is what the reason for the original split into two schools comes down to. So for this reason, some scholars say that the main cause, the initial split of the Sangha and the schools, and the original split in the two schools are actually different. Because the initial split of the Sangha is still not actually the original split. The original split is when the disagreements go stronger and stronger, and the Sangha became a little bit disharmonious in terms of Vinaya. There were some disagreements, and gradually there are more and more disagreements, and then eventually it wasn't only the Vinaya, it was also differences in view, and so then this original it became what we call the original split into schools. When there are so it's when the disagreements became very strong that it became the original split into two schools. So that is enough for today. Or that is, excuse me, that's all the Theravada explanations. So next I'd like to speak about the Mahasangika assertion. Now the Mahasangika assertion is that from the Mahasangika side, there's the Mahasangika Vinaya that is translated into Chinese. And it does talk about the Second Council. But it does not give a date from when the Second Council occurred. But it does explain that the main reason the second debate occurred was a debate over whether the bhikshus could accept gold and silver. It's because this controversy erupted over this, and in order to pacify it, they held the Second Council. Now, what's particular about the Mahasangika description of the Second Council is that in both the first and second councils, that before compiling the Vinaya and Pitaka, they decided what the main purpose and the main meaning of the words, compiling the words. They first settled like the structure for the words, the framework, and then they agreed on that. Then gradually, based on that framework, they compiled the words. And the purpose of this had five main points for this. And the first was like the prohibitions regarding bhikshus' residences. Third was local laws. Third was dharmas made specifically for some bhikshus who had discipline. And the fifth is the dharmas made specifically for some elder bhikshus. And so then, they also talk about we can summarize, we talk about the five. There is the pure because of summaries, pure because of method, pure because of discipline, the pure because of seniority, and the pure because of local customs. If we have time, later I'll explain these in detail. In any case, before holding the Second Council, they discussed what the aim of the council, what is the basic purpose of that. They first determined that, and then taking that as a basis, they then compiled the scriptures. And so the primary reason is the five pure dharmas. And so they consider these five dharmas to be very important. Secondly, during the Second Council, the 700 elders, among them there was a student of Upala called Dashapala, Dasara. And the 700 bhikshus asked him, Dasara, to compile the Vinaya. He accepted, and and what he said first was, it's on these words from the Mahasangika school. In any case, what it says, if you need an alms, you can ask for an alms. If you need robes, ask for robes. If you need medicine, ask for those. But asking for gold and silver is not permissible. So this is the second Mahasangika description of the Second Council. So the incident that caused it was because of accepting gold and silver is not a question of the 10 points. So next I'd like to give like a summary of the Second Council. Now the summary of the Second Council, as I said before, there's the first council was held in Rajagriha, and the second was held in Vaishali. These two councils are the two most important councils. And the reason for this is that because of these two councils, the basic form of the three Pitakas was established. If they hadn't had them, then we'd say, what are the three Pitakas? We wouldn't really be able to identify what the actual manner or way the three Pitakas were. And in particular, the four agamas taught by the Buddha and the rules, the Vinaya, were then recompiled and they were organized. And so this is conserving the Dharma for accomplishing liberation, which is as priceless as a wish-fulfilling jewel. And so for the second council is a very important council for us. Now, when you think about the ancient Indian or Sri Lankan and Chinese texts, as well as in the Tibetan texts, when we look at them, we see that not only were there the first and second council, there are also many other councils. After the second council, there is a third council and a fourth council. There are many councils that are mentioned in the histories. But the first and two councils are basically generally accepted and not undisputed. But among all the councils, the later councils are only recorded in the particular scriptures of each school, and they're not undisputed and generally accepted. For example, when we look at the things about Dolpa and so forth, they talk about a fourth council and so forth. But these are just the way that they're explained by certain individuals in certain schools. They're not generally accepted and undisputed in Buddhism as a whole. They can't be that way. And if we look at the Buddha Rinpoche's Dharma history, what it says is, when you talk about the third and fourth and fifth, were not said directly. They were not discussed in the Vinaya, so there's but there's no disagreement there. So when you talk about the appearance of the councils in the history, the first and the second councils are described by all the schools. But later, when you think about the third and the fourth, are only described in each individual schools or in some scattered texts, but they're not something that all the schools are able to accept. So we cannot, when we discuss the other councils, the fourth and fifth and so forth, we talk about the Nikaya Buddhism, the period of the Buddhism of the schools. So next, I've spoken about the second council. Now the next. So next is the second council and the 5 points of the Bhikkhu Mahadeva. So the 5 points of the Buddha of the Bhikkhu Mahadeva. We're talking about the 5 points of Bhikkhu Mahadeva. As I said before, the Buddhist Sangha split into two factions, as I said, and this is called the original split into schools. And when the main condition or the circumstance that led to the Buddhist Sangha to split into two schools, and how did that happen? There's if we talk about this, the description in the southern transmission and the northern transmissions of Buddhism are not the same, because the southern transmission of Thailand and Sri Lanka and so forth, they have This is what we call the southern transition. The northern transition is what we call Japan, China, Korea, and in the end, also, but also Tibet. So these are all what we call the northern transitions. So according to the southern transmission and the northern transitions descriptions are not the same. When they describe the basic events that led to the split separately. According to the southern transmission, between 100 and 200 years after the parinirvana, there developed different views of the Vaya between the bhikshus of the eastern and western regions. First, there's the debate over the 10 points. Then the elders from the western regions and also Sangha gathered, they determined that the 10 points were impermissible. Then finally, then after they read the teachings and they made the Vinayadism more precise and stricter, the elders held a council in Vaishali, the place where the controversy had erupted. But the But in the northern traditions, does not teach that they are about the 10 points. They don't even write about the 10 points. Now, according to the northern tradition, what were the circumstances that led to the original split of the Sangha into two schools, the original split? They say that it's the 5 points or the 5 views of Mahadeva. But before we talk about the 5 points or 5 views of Mahadeva, first of all, we have to understand who Mahadeva was. So if we don't talk about the story of Mahadeva, then it's difficult for understand what is the story of Mahadeva. So next I'd like to speak about the history of the story of Mahadeva. Do I have time for this? I think it's okay to just teach it. We talk about the story of Bhikshu Mahadeva. First of all, this is explained in the Great Exposition, the Mahavibhashika, and this is talked about in the 99th fascicle of the text. And so first of all, I'd like to give you an introduction to this. Now, what is the story of the Bhikshu Mahadeva? So now, in the ancient times, there's a country of Maruta in India. So Maruta, there lived a merchant there who he got married when he was young and had a son who was handsome and very beautiful to look at. A very good-looking boy. And so they called him Mahadeva. If you translate that into, and so the Tibetan, this is called Phla Chempo. But not longer after the son was born, the father, the merchant, because he was a merchant, he took his son's wealth and went off to another country to conduct some trade. And he didn't return for many years. So during that time, the Pook grew up. And when he became an adult, so he was very good looking. The mother and the son fell in love and they lived together. So I don't know how they fell in love, but they did. Then one day, the father was coming back. He'd finished his trade. And the son had heard this, and he got afraid because he had been living with his mother, and his father comes, he was afraid. And so together with his mother, they discussed how to, and they deceived his father and killed him. And so it's very scary. So he was very, very bold. He committed his first sin. So that is his first heinous karma, an expial karma. So this is one of the 5. This is the first of the heinous karmas, right? But as gradually people heard about when people learned about this, then they couldn't stay in this pleasant run. So he took his mother, and they went to the city of Marbuchen. Now this place, And after that, he said that there was an arhat from from his own place when he was there, and a venerable arhat monk came from his home there. They're from the same country. This arhat, he probably knows. He's going to probably tell other people that I've killed my father. So he suspected that. So he did something. And then he also killed that arhat. So killing an arhat is also another heinous deed. So he accumulated two heinous deeds. Later, so the worst thing his mother also fell in love with another man. But when his mother fell in love with it, he learned that he got angry, and he said, I've already committed two great sins for you. At first I killed my father, I killed an arhat. Not only that, we've traveled to many different other countries. We left our own homeland and gone to other regions. We've had many problems. And now you're going to leave me and fall in love with another person? It's like you're a really treacherous woman. You're not. So there's no way I can bear this. So he also did something and killed his mother as well. So he'd killed his father, he'd killed an arhat, he killed his mother, so he had committed three heinous deeds. He did accumulate the three husbands, but he hadn't completely severed his roots of virtue. There's a little bit of virtue. And so it means that he didn't completely lose all faith in the Dharma. Because he had this little bit of, he had done such horrible misdeeds that he regretted them terribly. He wasn't able to sleep at night or sit still the day. He said, I've done all these terrible deeds. I've done these heinous deeds. So how can I purify these great misdeeds? And so he thought about this, only this, day and night. He had just not at all. There's no way to relax, no way to feel good. But later he heard that the Shramanas, the sons of the Bhikshus, that is the sons of Shakya, he found out that they had a way for completely purifying his misdeeds. So he went to a monastery, the Changa monastery. He went there by foot. When he came to the door, there's a bhikshu who was walking back and forth there. So there's a pacing, right? Pacing back and forth. So there's a pacing back and forth, reciting the scriptures as he checked back. And the verse that this bhikshu was reciting was, a person who has committed great sins can eliminate them by cultivating virtue. This illuminates the world like the moon emerging from clouds. No matter how great a misdeed a person commits, they can purify it. Because even like the moon is first covered by clouds, if the clouds go away, then it can illuminate the world. So even if you have accumulated great sins, you can eliminate them, cultivate virtues. So he heard this, and he became really happy about it. He was just delighted to hear it. And he went for refuge in the Buddhist teachings. He thought if he did this, then he could really purify all his misdeeds. So he went to a bhikshu and said, please give me ordination. I'm going to become a monk. Now, actually, it's not so easy to become a bhikshu. You have to ask about your obstacles. So have you killed your father? Have you killed your mother? You have to ask all these to see whether it's appropriate to make you a monk or not. But this bhikshu, because Mahadeva was so insistent, he didn't have time to ask for that, and he ordained him. And he left his name as Mahadeva. So his name prior to that had been Mahadeva, and he was also given the same name, Mahadeva. So then that monk gave Mahadeva the instructions, the teachings. So Mahadeva, he was really intelligent. Because he's so intelligent, he'd gone forth, and soon, not long after that, he had actually memorized all the words of the three baskets. He'd recite the words completely purely, and he could explain them even as people said this. People in there seem like their refuge. They took him as their refuge, the person to put their hope in. Even the king, inviting him to the palace, made offerings and requested him to teach the Dharma. But one time when he was staying at the monastery, he was probably many different thoughts, and he was thinking about different things. Then one night when he fell asleep, he ejaculated a bit. When that happened, now Mahadeva had told someone else that, oh, I'm an arhat. He pretended that he was an arhat. Even though he wasn't an arhat, he pretended to be one and told this other person. And so the other person accepts. When that person saw his soiled robes, the student had to wash them. The students asked, the student said, and he asked him, Mahadeva, if you're an arhat, then so the arhats have exhausted all the defilements. So how did this happen to you? He asked. And Mahadeva replied, there's the Mara of the child of the gods caused this. You shouldn't doubt me. So generally, there are two different types of defilements. There are the afflictive, and there are the impure ones. The afflictive ones are not, but the impure ones are. And the reason is that even though the arhats have no afflictions, they have no afflictions, but they have not abandoned urine, feces, mucus, and so forth. So sometimes the children of the Mars, the child of the gods, are always really jealous of the Buddha's teachings, and they're also trying to harm those who cultivate virtue. They even try to harm arhats. And so my mission is not my problem. It's because of Mars. The Mars made it happen. You shouldn't doubt me. So that was his first wrong view. This is the first view of Mahadeva. That's the explanation of that. So that's the first wrong explanation he gave. And then the second was that Mahadeva seemed to have many students. In order to please the students, and so that the students would respect him, he would deceive them and say, you have this and that fruit of the Shramana path. So if you have received the fruit, you're a stream mentor, you have received the state of a once returner, you've achieved the state of a non-returner. He made these determinations, and at that point, the students would bow respectfully and say, since arhats have their own wisdom, we've heard, so you're saying that we're stream mentors or once returner or non-returners. If it is true, as you're saying, we don't know anything ourselves. It's like aren't supposed to have their own religion, but we don't know anything. And so this picture of Mahadeva said, it's also, you can't say that they know everything. Of course, there's a lot they don't know. You need to believe, he says. You need to believe in yourself. There are two different types. There's the afflicted ignorance, and there's the unafflicted ignorance. And the afflicted ignorance arhats don't have, but the unafflicted ignorance is something that the arhats do have. So if you think, so it's basically, if we talk about it in terms of the Mahayana, saying that the arhats don't have afflictive obscurations, but they do have cognitive obscurations. So this is the second view. Then after that, the student said, it's fine if we don't know. If we don't know, but if we sometimes, but the nobles are said to be free of doubt. It's okay if we don't know, but nobles, it said that nobles don't have any doubt, but we have a lot of doubt. We sort of wonder, really, is it that case so about the four votes? But Arhats have seen they've seen the nature of things truly, and they've seen the fortress directly, and they don't have any doubt, but we do. And so what Mahadeva said is, Arhats do have doubts. There are two different types of doubt. The first is the doubt as the nature of the kernels, the afflictions. That is one that the Arhats don't have. The second is doubt about what is appropriate and inappropriate, which sometimes they debate, and the Arhats are not able to do this. Even Pratyeka Buddhas have this, so why mention? Of course, Shravakas also have that. So you don't need to disparage yourselves, he said. This is the third wrong view. Then after that, when the students were reciting sutras, they saw stated that Arhats possess the eye of wisdom and are able to know their own liberation directly. And so they asked Mahadeva about this. They said, if you'd like, you say, we're all Arhats. We should realize this ourselves. We should be able to realize. But you've already given. It's not just that you've told us, but we also have to. We're not able to enter the path by ourselves. So why is that? And so Mahadeva said that some Arhats enter on the path only through the power of others without knowing it themselves. For example, Shariputra is supreme in wisdom, Prajna, and Madhyalena is supreme in miraculous powers. But even when the Buddha when the Buddha doesn't get prophecies, even they don't know themselves. Even though the greatest in Prajna, the greatest in miraculous powers, can't know on their own without the Buddha giving the prophecies. And so it's so it happens that sometimes you have to enter the path because of someone else's direction. So you don't need to question. That is the fourth wrong view. In any case, this Mahadeva had done many misdeeds. He'd done many misdeeds that many people have done, but he hadn't completely severed his virtuous roots. So sometimes instead, in the middle of the night, he'd think about all of the great misdeeds he'd accumulated. And because I've done that, so I'm going to think about what Lord would have fallen to, what intense suffering he would experience. And he became really terrified of this. And he'd say, oh, the suffering, whoa, pity. And he'd cry out like this. In the middle of the night, he'd say, suffering. It's like, so is there anyone worse than me, he'd say. And he'd wail like this. And those nearby students heard this. And when they heard this, then they also became doubtful. The next morning, they'd ask Mahadeva, are you doing well? Are you feeling well? Ma said, I'm feeling well. And the student said, so last night, in the middle of the night, you start crying out, you're really wailing. Why is that? And Mahadeva said, oh, you don't need to do it. Mahadeva said, because I'm calling the nobles. I was calling them, so you don't need to worry about them. If I don't say to them, it's like when we're doing this, they're like, this is the path of the noble ones. If you had to recite it from that, if you say, so I'm talking about the suffering, and if you say suffering, then there's like, then you can arouse this within your being. And so in the middle of the night, I'm always saying suffering over again. That's the reason why. So that's the way I explained it. So that is the fifth wrong view. So that is the 5 wrong views of the Bhikshu Mahadeva. Now, we're not finished with the story of Mahadeva, but I think it's okay to speak about that. I think we'll leave it for here today. Thank you.